As the bombs fall on Tehran, something just happened behind closed doors in Beijing that changes everything. For days, everyone's eyes have been glued to Tehran, to the missile strikes, to the collapsing Navy. But in the last 24 hours, China just made an absolute game-changing decision. The one nation buying almost all of Iran's oil, the one regime Tehran thought would bail them out and come to their rescue, just sent a signal so shocking, so earth-shattering, that the mullahs are suddenly realizing they're fighting this war completely alone. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you rightly understand this absolutely historic moment that's unfolding in the Middle East and beyond with breaking news and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. So you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. A growing number of analysts are realizing that this war in Iran is part of a much larger grand strategy. And at the heart of that strategy is China. The key here is that Iran is not simply a rogue state that poses an existential threat to countries in the Middle East and possibly the United States. Fundamentally, it has become a core pillar of China's Middle East strategy. China is Iran's single most important economic partner. Various energy trackers estimate that well over 80%, in recent months, close to 90% of Iran's exported crude has been going straight to China. The New York Times calculated that roughly 5% of Iran's entire GDP now comes just from those oil sales to China. That's how critical this relationship is to keeping the regime's lights on. But even more importantly, the tens of billions of dollars that China sends to Iran helps to build the arsenal of long-range missiles, their drones, and the digital art infrastructure that enables the regime's authoritarian reign over its people. Those missiles, particularly hypersonic missiles, and an openly hostile Iranian Navy that happens now to be at the bottom of the sea, served as a Chinese proxy to occupy and contain American power in the Gulf region. Every American ship, every American aircraft, every American missile engaged in the Middle East is one taken away from the Taiwan Strait. Iran was a beneficiary of the Belt and Road Initiative and infrastructure projects financed by Beijing, and Beijing was enjoying a most favored nation relationship with the one country that controlled the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil supply passes through every day. So now you can understand why Iran felt, frankly, so invincible, why they were reportedly so cocky in their negotiations with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. They were literally bragging that they had controlled about 460 kilograms of uranium enriched 60%, which they said was enough. They actually said it was enough to produce 11 nuclear bombs, once further enriched to weapons grade. They openly boasted about it. And they did that because they frankly thought they were invincible. They had the single biggest army on the planet behind them in Beijing, a regime they were convinced would shield them with oil purchases, missiles, and diplomatic cover the moment things got hot. In their minds, that 60% stockpile plus China's backing meant that they could taunt Trump at the table. They could rattle the region with drones and proxies and still sleep soundly at night, certain that the dragon in the east would never let the hammer actually fall. And to make matters even worse, reports were coming out that China was about to arm Iran with CM-302 supersonic anti-ship missiles, as well as China's DF-17 hypersonic glide missiles. Now, that was obviously, there was obviously an international outcry over that, but China wouldn't budge.
Both China and Iran are two fully independent countries with their sovereignty. And there is no international law which prohibits China and Iran to engage with each other in commercial transactions. And China happens to produce some of the most sophisticated missiles of all kinds. And it's absolutely right for China and Iran to size up each other and engage in whatever economic and commercial transactions they desire to do that, including involving such military missiles. And I think the whole world should be put on notice that both China and Iran will have full sovereign right to do such commercial transactions with each other, and no country should pretend to be surprised.
So again, you can see why they were so cocky. However, you know what they say about pride. What Iranian officials apparently failed to factor in was that for all of that Iranian dependence on China, China was not equally dependent on Iran. Yeah, Iranian barrels matter. Roughly 13% of China's seaborne oil imports have been coming directly from Iran, but more than half of China's tanker-delivered oil comes from the broader Gulf and Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, Oman, Kuwait, and all of its sails through the Strait of Hormuz. So when the bombs started dropping on Tehran and Iranian forces started firing missiles in retaliation, that's when the regime looked to Beijing for those CM-302 ship-killing supersonic missiles so they could effectively shut down Hormuz. And that's when Beijing had to suddenly realize it had to choose. Does it risk 50% of its oil supply from the wider Gulf region just to protect that 13% from Iran? Or does it quietly step back, rhetorically condemn the violence, and then more or less look the other way? And to the regime's utter and complete shock, when they turned around expecting to see the Red Dragon having their backs, what Beijing just decided literally changed everything. But first, let me ask you a question. Are you working incredibly hard, maybe even successful by most standards, but you feel like you're spread too thin, right? Not enough butter over too much bread, you might say. So you're working your life away and you're wondering, when do I actually get to enjoy my life? Here's the problem. The elites have their system. They've rigged the game so that if you want more money, you've got to give them more time. And if you want more time, well, you're going to have to sacrifice money. It's a trap that keeps you dependent, exhausted, and anxious about the future. But what if you could have your own system? What if there's a way to build financial security for your family that doesn't require employees or customers or inventory or any of the headaches that come with traditional businesses? What if you could do it in just minutes a day or even minutes per week from anywhere you choose? Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Steve, that sounds a little too good to be true. And I get it. But here's what I've learned. Trading is actually the best business in the world when you do it the right way. And before you think trading, that's too complicated. That's too risky. Isn't that like gambling or so on? Let me tell you about my good friend, Troy Noonan, the backpack trader. He's spent 30 years perfecting a step-by-step approach that makes this accessible to everybody. I'm talking ordinary people like you and me. And I know it works because I'm actually a member of his program. I've tried it out. And here's what makes Troy's approach different. He'll show you how to prove the system works for you before you risk a single penny of your hard-earned money. It's like it's learning to fly on a simulator. You don't actually fly first. You got to make sure you do it perfect on a simulator. Then you can fly. It's the same thing he does with trading. You could see the results first, then decide if it's for you. If you're ready to see how this could play a massive role in improving your life situation and giving you your time back, go to backpacktrader.com/TurleyFreedom right now. You can just click on the link below. Troy is hosting a special free live training called Backpack Trader Live exclusively for our community. And when you register, he'll instantly send you his 12 Powers to Successful Trading ebook, packed with concepts no one else teaches, the ingredients that lead to successful trading and the like. I know, I read it. It's brilliant. And when you show up to the training, you'll get an exclusive invitation to a private roundtable with me and other folks from our community who are now living this dream lifestyle. This is your chance to stop being trapped in their system and start building your own. Go to backpacktrader.com/TurleyFreedom right now and reserve your spot. Your bright, beautiful future is waiting. Let's go get it. In a stunning turnaround, a Chinese spokesperson denied any accuracy to the report that China had agreed to sell Iran advanced CM-302 supersonic anti-ship missiles, and most certainly will not be doing so. So it was a stunning about face, and it made it absolutely clear China's not getting involved in this. It is most certainly not going to war with America over Iran, over 13% of their oil. They condemned the strikes. They shouted sovereignty. But when it came time to actually back up Tehran with real hardware, the very hardware they promised, China folded. No CM-302s, no air defense systems, no targeting data, no satellite cueing, nothing that would drag them into direct confrontation with Trump. And it gets even more brutal. Beijing's foreign minister went out of his way to tell Iran to pay attention to the reasonable concerns of its neighboring countries. In other words, stop hitting Saudi Arabia, stop hitting the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, not because Iran was violating their sovereignty, but because those are the very states that ship most of China's oil and LNG through Hormuz. And so obviously China made it even more clear that Tehran was not to even think about closing Hormuz, with energy outlets reporting that Beijing is leaning hard on Iran to keep the sea lanes open because Asian imports, especially Chinese imports, are at risk of traffic halts. I don't even know what navy they would use to close it at this point. So Iran thought it was going to leverage China, but in reality, it was China leveraging Iran. Iran was China's vassal, their proxy in the Middle East. They dumped tens of billions of dollars of investment in Iran, and now it's literally gone up in smoke. For the last few years, commentators told us that this was the dawn of a new anti-American axis. China, Iran joining Russia, building an alternative order in Asia. And they certainly were doing that during the Biden years. But now with the rise of Trump and America's civilizationalist renewal, Trump called the bluff in this asymmetrical relationship because he knew that it was Iran that had literally everything to lose. The numbers are in. Chinese investment in Iran has fallen dramatically short of the axis that was promised. China wanted discounted oil and leverage. Iran wanted protection and parity. This war has exposed just how asymmetrical that relationship really is, because when it came time for China to meet the moment, Iran found out the hard way that they were nothing more than fair weather friends. Iran has been completely isolated. No one is coming to their defense. Hezbollah's in tatters. Hamas has been crushed. The Houthis are a no-show. And China, the red dragon that Iran so brazenly thought their friend, is literally nowhere to be found. The days of the Iranian regime are coming to an end. And ironically, it appears all thanks to China.